Hello my friends, my name is Artur Rehi and I am an Estonian soldier. I've done many videos about Second World War, the US Marines, the US weaponry, but there is one big elephant in the room that I haven't watched actually. It's Pearl Harbor. Everybody knows about Pearl Harbor, I know about it, I've seen the movie, but I don't know the detailing behind it. So today we're gonna jump into it, discover what went on behind it, the Japanese side, the US perspective, everything. A bit of cool history for you. So go and grab your cup, Estonian Youtuber Cup, get some green tea and let's watch the video.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Stay tuned to WOR for further development.
Imagine you're listening to a sports program and you hear this, like suddenly, oh, our country has been attacked by Japan, half a world away. How did they get here? I think some of the listeners from America were actually afraid.
1941, Japan situation. America and other nations have imposed an oil embargo on Japan, which means Japan cannot continue their conquests. No problem, Japan would just get the oil it needs from the Dutch Indies. Their underfunded and undergunned fleet will pose no threat to the Imperial Japanese Navy. And if their ally, Great Britain, joins the conflict, well, Japan will fight them too. Both nations are too occupied with the European war anyways.
Yeah.
So, through their new conquests, Japan's demand for resources shall be met.
Japan actually didn't have enemies in the Far East. No enemies at all. Britain couldn't protect those countries, US didn't want to. And those countries itself were really weak actually. So if they wouldn't have attacked the US, I think the biggest enemy would be the Soviet Union, which actually I think they could have handled. I think.
However, geography has cursed them. Look at what lays beside their vital supply lines. The Philippines, a US territory. Although America is not officially allied with the British and the Dutch, they are on friendly terms. Japan cannot afford the risk of the US entering the war while they are in the midst of their campaign. Their proximity to Japan's supply lines puts into jeopardy everything they are about to fight for. Basically, the Americans would be holding a dagger to Japan's throat the entire time they conduct their campaign, ready to commence hostilities at a moment's notice. Thus, they come to the conclusion that they must take out the Americans as well. This calls not only for an invasion of the Philippines, but also a preemptive strike on the powerful American fleet at Pearl Harbor. And so with that, history was set.
Okay, so Pearl Harbor actually was the closest one I see it on the map now. But I don't know what the Japanese plan enlisted, what ideas they had. If they wanted to take down US fleet in Pearl Harbor, it wouldn't have ended with that. US can build another fleet within 2 to 3 years if they really go into it, right? You guys could do that. And just send another one. Like they would have, Japan would have had to take down the entire country and have a ground invasion of US, which is damn impossible knowing the gun laws. Even back then, people had guns, I think. Talking about that actually, talking about guns. In the Discord, right, I voice chat with General Rolls. The generals, we voice chatted on Monday, and they showed me their gun collection. Some of them are actually ranks in the military. And one dude, this one general guy had a lot of damn guns in the basement. More than, I don't know, the whole Estonian military company has in their company. He had more guns than that. That was really cool. If you want to chat with me, become a general, become a member of this channel. You can pick between soldiers, sergeants and generals. Generals can voice chat with me. Next one will be next week. We'll do it once a week. First, free and signed cup will be sent out next week. So if you want that, become a member in the Discord. Links are in the description below.
Japan set its powerful Kido Butai to strike Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7th. Now, the goal of the raids was as follows. 1. Sink a battleship. This was for propaganda purposes. Japan reasoned that if America saw their beloved battleships, symbols of their naval power, destroyed, their will to wage war against Japan would be shattered as well. 2. Immobilize.
Okay, so I have a problem with that. Every time these huge countries make these mistakes. Oh, if we destroy this, the people will see that they can be weak and then they don't want to fight anymore. Let me tell you, let me break it to you. Whichever big country you are, whichever small enemy you attack, the more you attack them, the more mad they get. It worked with Estonians also. Everybody was killed and executed and still the Forest Brothers fought back. So you can't break people's backs by destroying their military or destroying their families or infrastructure. That makes them only more mad. Of course, yeah, then you would have to destroy every last one of them, then you would win, but that's a lot of work. But yes, that tactic doesn't work.
The fleet for 6 months. The Japanese estimated that they needed 6 months to do all of their conquests, Then they would be on the defensive and await the American counterattacks and wear them down, culminating in a decisive naval clash. So note, the Japanese knew they could not win a long-term war with America, so Japanese strategy revolved on them waging a short-term war. This was why attacking the fuel tanks or naval facilities at Pearl Harbor was not even considered in the planning phase. It was irrelevant to the 6-month goal. At Pearl Harbor were some 80 ships. There were 8 battleships, 7 of them in battleship role and 1 in dry dock. 8 cruisers were at Pearl Harbor, 4 of which were accessible to torpedoes, and dozens of destroyers and auxiliaries were docked elsewhere. Unfortunately for the Japanese, the 3 American carriers were all at sea and not in port that fateful day. The attack on Pearl Harbor would be carried out by 6 fleet carriers and its strike force of 350 planes.
Ooh.
Their crews had endured 10 months of training for this attack. In addition, 5 midget submarines would be tasked with penetrating the harbor and attacking in conjunction with the main airstrike. The attack would be composed of 2 waves.
That's a huge attack. If I wouldn't know the outcome, I would imagine, seeing these numbers, I would imagine they would destroy the whole harbor, the whole fleet and everything inside of it. How many carriers did Japan have in total together? US has 11 now, and Japan already had 6 back then. In the sea, you could almost say they were rivals to the US.
In the first wave, Lieutenant Fuchida commanded a strike against the ships in the harbor. The key to the first wave was the 50 level bombers and 40 torpedo bombers, also known as Kates. Their torpedoes had been modified with wooden fins so that they could be effective in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor. Their priority targets were the battleships and carriers at port. The first wave of 183 aircraft was launched at 6 a.m. The strike force approached Oahu, and soon the formation separated into groups to attack their assigned airfields and targets. The sky was completely clear of American fighters. The Japanese had achieved complete surprise.
Oh, wow.
The dive bombers beat the torpedo bombers to Pearl Harbor, the first bombs hitting the southern tip of Ford Island minutes before even the first torpedo had been launched. Planes from Hiru and Soryu approached at 7:55. They were disappointed to discover that their targets, the carriers, were not in port that day. Lieutenant Nagai, leader of Soryu's air group, realized there were no potential targets, so he and his wingman pulled off. However, the remaining 6 attacked. They probably mistook the OT commissioned battleship, the USS Utah, as a capital ship, and they fired upon her. 2 torpedoes slammed into her before 8 a.m. The rest missed. One missed so badly that the USS Raleigh was hit. The Utah capsized at 8:12. The Raleigh almost suffered a similar fate, but prompt damage control prevented her from capsizing.
Utah capsizing. Forgive me, I don't know anything about naval ships, naval procedures, but it seems like they're trying to pull it back up. And at the time when the attack is going on, you're trying to get the ship back on and everything's burning next to you. You must be really focused and know what you're doing. The plane's up above, shooting down your fellow men, and you're still trying to get the ship up. It's really cool. Brave men. What's the kill count for Americans in Pearl Harbor and for Japanese?
Nagai went around Ford Island and launched against what he believed was a battleship. In reality, it was just a cruiser, the USS Helena. She was double berthed with an old mine layer, the Ogallala. Its silhouette probably gave the impression of a battleship. His torpedo actually went under Ogallala's heel and exploded into Helena's hull, damaging both ships.
Ooh.
Nagai's wingman recognized that it was just a cruiser and decided to attack Battleship Row instead. The 8 Hiru planes didn't fare any better. Lieutenant Hirata and his wingman saw that there were no viable targets, so they headed for Battleship Row. However, the remaining 6 aircraft who were lagging behind got to see Nagai's attack on Helena and followed suit. 4 launched torpedoes, but they all missed terribly. The last pair aborted their run at the last minute and headed for the battleships. So now we have 4 Hiru and 1 Soryu plane maneuvering for Battleship Row, cutting right across the path of the other 24 torpedo bombers who are just coming in. In this photograph, you can see the opening stages of the attack. Both the Utah and Raleigh have been hit, and Utah is listing to port. At this moment, the torpedo runs against the battleships have begun. You can even spot 2 planes finishing their bomb runs.
Okay, so they wanted to take down the carriers, but they could only find these ships. Every loss of ship is a huge amount of money and huge amount of work, right? So even if they don't have the carriers, they still take down the task force around the carrier, right? The carriers cannot travel alone, and if they take down these ships, the carriers cannot move. So they still have value of taking down those battleships, taking down those auxiliary ships. Or is it all worthless next to the carriers?
Due to the geography of Pearl Harbor, the torpedo bombers really just had one avenue of approach. If they had gone over the naval buildings, the turbulence would have thrown off their accuracy and limited their launch window. Therefore, the overwhelming majority of the Cape bombers flew single file down the southeast lock. The result was that instead of the attack being spread out, it would be disproportionately concentrated on the southern tip of Battleship Row, much to Oklahoma's and West Virginia's despair. 12 Akagi planes approached single file, 1,000 feet apart, starting at 7:57.
Single 1,000 feet is 300 meters, so 12 planes, 300 meters apart, attacking 2 ships. I would imagine those ships would be just gone in minutes.
All of Akagi's 12 planes launched against these 2 battleships, except one, which skillfully maneuvered and struck the California.
Okay.
The 4 Hidu planes from before joined shortly afterwards and launched against Oklahoma and West Virginia. Contrary to belief, the Japanese were not attacking with impunity. The defenders had taken advantage of the precious minutes warning afforded by the Fort Allen bomb blast, so that when the first torpedo planes of Akagi approached, many anti-aircraft gunners were already prepared. These vulnerable, slow-moving Kates had to make their torpedo runs under fire. 3 miles behind Akagi's strike was Kaga's air group. By now, the anti-aircraft fire was becoming more effective, and again, Oklahoma and West Virginia took the brunt of the attack.
So the Oklahoma and West Virginia ships are actually defending the rest of the ships. They are taking over 10 hits combined. And they don't need more hits, they're gone. I'm pretty sure they're gone. But now the wrecks are just defending the rest of the ships. I have a cup, it's the Estonian Youtuber Cup. I have a cup, you have a cup, we have the Estonian Youtuber Cup. We're back with the competition, my friends. 4th of July will be the date, well, it will all end. Then we'll find out the winner. The winning state will get a flag in the background of my videos. I'll visit that state. I'll make a history video about that state. You have something in the game, so go and get the cup. Let's make your state win. First of all, we have James as Sid from Williston, North Dakota. North Dakota is the underdog. Nobody really knows much about that state. I've heard you guys are very surprised that North Dakota has that many orders. But I like the underdog, so carry on, North Dakota. We have Kevin Ennis from Garland, Texas. Yeah, Texas! Weirdly enough, Texas hasn't been the state of the day yet, although it's the winning state right now. We have Colin Blatz. Oh my god, you don't go to Russia. You know, Mr. Blatz, your last name means female genitalia in Russia. I am very sorry to tell you this. In America you're fine, a nice dude I'm sure, but in Russia you would have difficulties. You're from Grand Rapids, Michigan. We have Declan O'Farrell. O'Farrell, that's Irish or... yeah, that's Irish or Scottish. O'Farrell. Your city is called Seattle, it's in Washington. Not DC, just Washington. Finally we have Douglas Cole from Austin, Texas. And that means Texas gets 2 orders in this video, which makes it the state of the day. Finally, the winning state hasn't been the state of the day. What's up with that? Well, now we'll change that. Let me add the point, then we'll learn one cool fact about Texas, and then it gets the green line of fame under its name. The state of the day fact about Texas. You know the Six Flags entertainment park, amusement park? I've been to there. I've been to the California one. It was really cool. I loved it. Quite expensive though. Six Flags is named after the 6 countries, the 6 foreign powers who have ruled over Texas. That's why the Six Flags. Very strange, ain't it? But it's a cool fact to know. The green line of fame. Yeah, the state of the day, Texas. It was about time. Alright my friends, remember the 4th of July. Be back to see the live stream, to see the winner, the winning state people who will have the opportunity to come to the meetup, because I'll be in that state in the future. Back to the video.
Middle of their launch, that single Soryu plane from earlier swept in and got a hit on the California. However, one of Kaga's plane veered to the right because of this, but was able to hit the Nevada at 803. Kaga's air group was the only one to suffer losses. 5 of the last 7 attacking Kates were shot down. In this historic photograph, the torpedo attack is perfectly captured. You can see the torpedo hits on the Oklahoma, West Virginia, and the California. All of them are gushing out oil. In the background, you can see Hickam Field burning, and the Helena can be seen leaning against the Oglala. And a Japanese plane can also be spotted.
Oh.
However, the attack wasn't executed as smoothly as hoped. An attack that should have taken less than 90 seconds stretched out over 11 minutes from first run to last. Some had to abort and redo their runs due to mutual interference, and the heavy anti-aircraft fire threw off the pilot's aim.
And now, this was the first wave, and they only took down about, let's call it even, 6 to 7 ships, which is nothing. I mean, now the anti-aircraft weapons are ready, the crew is ready. If they come again, they will be shot down. A lot of them, so this attack is already a failure. There's no carriers, they took down only 5 to 6 ships. The bulk of the ships are still in the port and floating, and now harbor is ready to fire back. So at this point, I would see this already as a failure. The enemy is so strong, the US would be so strong, the only way to win is to take down this with very big surprise attack that works. This one already failed, in my eyes.
And caused them to over-concentrate on just 2 battleships. 21 torpedoes were launched at Oklahoma and West Virginia, over half of the available torpedoes. Oklahoma had 12 torpedoes launched at her. 5 hit her, and she capsized in 15 minutes. West Virginia was hit by 7 torpedoes, but prompt counterflooding prevented her from capsizing, and she settled to the bottom. California should not have sunk from 2 torpedoes, but her hatches were open for inspection that morning, which contributed to her sinking. And she was abandoned due to fires, and when she was reboarded, it was too late. Of the 36 torpedoes launched, only 19 achieved hits. That's a 48% hit rate.
48% hit rate back then, it sounds pretty good. As much as I remember about the Midway battle, if the Americans bombed the Japanese, when I watched the Japanese perspective, they didn't actually, the hit rate was about 20%. It was really low, so this seems really good. 20% was Midway, Americans bombing on Japanese carriers. But this seems good. I don't think how you could get even better, but I mean, yes, you could.
Feet above came Fuchida and his high-level bombers. Their mission was to take out the inboard battleships inaccessible to torpedoes. They came in groups of 5. They released their salvos and scored an impressive 20% hit rate. Unfortunately for the Japanese, out of the 10 bomb hits, about 6 were low-order detonations or malfunctions.
What?
That is an outrageous 60% dud rate. The Japanese aviators were greatly let down by their weaponry.
60% bomb failures, they didn't explode. Well, lucky Americans, you get bombed with the bomb, it just doesn't explode. It's your lucky day, you live another day. But this was a very accurate strike. But yes, the weaponry. This shows you how much the quality of the weaponry matters in war. If more bombs would have exploded, the Americans would have lost maybe more ships, and more time would have been needed to repair them or even make them battle equipped. Maybe they even couldn't repair them at all. All just because of 1 or 2 malfunctioning bombs. They were made in the factory, someone was too lazy, or the quality, the design was bad of the bombs. And the design and the quality comes out of the brainpower and the money you can put into the research, which America can do much better than Soviet Union and Japan, and that plays a role in battles.
Damage could have been deadlier. However, the distribution was effective. California was missed, but 2 ineffective hits on Maryland were scored. Both West Virginia and the Tennessee were hit twice, and there were 2 additional collateral damage hits on the repair ship Vestal, moored outboard of the Arizona. Vestal suffered severe flooding and had to be beached afterwards. But all of these hits were overshadowed by the 2 hits on the USS Arizona. The first struck her aft on the quarterdeck, and another landed near her number 2 turret. It caused a magazine explosion, which exploded with a great force, and a tremendous fireball was seen. She split in half and sunk in the harbor, taking more than 1,000 sailors with her. Heavy fires burned for days. The explosion was
1,000 sailors, just in a matter of seconds. Whew, damn. And even that did not make this attack successful just yet. I want to see something more. This attack would have been successful by the Japanese if they would have taken down the whole fleet in that harbor.
Actually caught on tape by Dr. Hackinson, who was on the hospital ship Solace. Nevada was the only battleship not suffering heavy damage and capable of getting underway. She did so at 8:40 with the intention of heading out of the channel. Now, one of the mini-subs actually did make it into the harbor. The other 4 were unsuccessful. At 8:36, the sea tender, the USS Curtis, spotted a sub. The submarine fired at Curtis but missed. In return, the submarine was hit by a 5-inch shell. The destroyer Monaghan, which happened to be getting underway at this moment, saw the sub and approached with the intent to ram her. The sub turned and fired its last torpedo, which missed the destroyer. At 8:40, the sub was rammed and depth charged. She sunk with both crew members killed.
Both crew members? What? Mini subs? Oh, these are one of those really small subs. 2 crew members and only 2 torpedoes. Kind of a suicide attack. I mean, the whole Pearl Harbor was, but still, imagine only 2 of you going into enemy territory surrounded with dozens of ships with anti-submarine capabilities, and there's only 2 of you, you have 2 torpedoes, you have to shoot and get out. Yeah, you will die for your emperor. That's kamikaze. That was a Banzai, I think. Let's take this time, let's pause this crazy battle right now and take the time to thank the Patreons. First of all, we have Michael James. Thank you, Michael, for becoming a Patreon. Second of all, we have Step Tech. Thank you for becoming a Patreon. Finally, we have Shrek1982. That's your real name. I've seen the birth certificate. That's the real name he was born with. Thank you, Mr. Shrek. Second wave.
167 planes formed the attack of the second wave, of which 78 were dive bombers allocated to go against warships.
But now the
Much was expected from these skilled pilots. However, their performance was disappointing. First, take a moment to see what they were up against. By now, the anti-aircraft defenses were up and ready to greet the dive bombers. Couple this with the fact that there was a 70 to 90% low overcast, their accuracy was destined to be off. But most importantly, these pilots were guilty of poor target selection. This was their priority list. These dive bombers with their general purpose bombs were well suited for attacking the 8 cruisers left in Pearl Harbor. But during the attack, about roughly 30 attacked battleships, only 17 went for cruisers, 16 attacked destroyers, and 12 attacked auxiliaries. The attack began at 8:54. The USS Nevada was caught in its escape during the second wave. The prospect of sinking the ship in the channel and thus blocking access to Pearl Harbor was a very, very improbable outcome. However, the pilots couldn't resist the opportunity, so they attacked from 2 directions. 14 to 18 valves dropped against Nevada. Nevada was hit 5 times by 9 o'clock. And
14 to 18 planes against Nevada. The majority attacked this one ship. And I guess, yeah, as you could hear, they wanted to lock the harbor with it. The shipwreck would be in the way, no one else can escape. But I mean, how many waves can you attack if all of the flak guns, the anti-aerial guns are ready? You can't send in more waves because they would shoot them down.
At 9:10, she had to beach herself. This was the shining moment of the second wave. But it deserves to be criticized. Did they contribute to sinking a battleship? Yeah, but it was by the rarest of luck. Nevada succumbed not to Japanese bombs, but to poor material condition, critical design flaws, and a massively significant damage control mistake. And again, it still doesn't make it any wiser. The battleship should have been avoided. The attempt to sink Nevada in the channel was a waste of ordnance that could have been better employed against targets more vulnerable to their effects. 1 to 3 dive bombers went for California, scoring 1 hit. The USS Pennsylvania, the fleet's flagship, the only battleship in dock, was also poorly selected. 9 bombers went after her. She suffered only a single hit at 9:06. The real victims, though, were the 2 destroyers ahead of her, which received collateral damage. 2 hit the Cassin and 1 hit the Downs, heavily damaging both. So there could be a cultural explanation to why the Japanese pilots went for battleships. These young 20-year-old pilots were going into the most significant battle in Japan's history.
20-year-old pilots doing all of this. Very young and very inexperienced. I mean, if you're 20 years old, you can't have that much experience. How young you're gonna start flying? 15 years old? I think they have about max 3 years of flying time by that point, and seems too little for me to make the most important battle in the Second World War for the US, to be a success. Japan took a huge gamble on this.
No one wanted to go back home and report that they attacked a simple cruiser or a destroyer. No way. They wanted to go for battleships, sticking true to their samurai spirit. But overall, the second wave attack was just scattered throughout Pearl Harbor, with many attacks missing their targets. A puzzling target selection was the destroyer USS Shaw, which was targeted by as many as 15 bombers.
What? 15?
3 bombs hit her, one of which unleashed a tremendous fireball. The reason to her being targeted was probably because she was in a floating dry dock and resembled a capital ship. On the west side, the Curtis, a sea tender, was inexplicably targeted. A damaged valve committed a suicide dive and crashed into her, and minutes later she was hit by a bomb. And lastly, the only hit on a top priority target was on the Raleigh. As many as 5 dive bombers went for her, still listing from that torpedo hit. She was hit once at 9:08. Also, we can add a near miss on the Honolulu, which caused minor damage. So only 1 hit and 1 damage near miss were achieved on the dive bomber's highest priority targets.
See, all the things they hit were secondary targets. That doesn't play that huge of a role in a real battle because they could replace those ships, but the primary targets were irreplaceable that fast, so still a failure as of now. I want to see if there's a point in Pearl Harbor battle when it was a success, but I think from the very beginning, from the first wave, it already failed. There were no carriers. If they took down even 1 to 2 carriers and nothing else, this attack would have been a success. But 0 carriers and 0 primary targets after those, it's a failure.
Against the 55% accuracy rate achieved during their training, the pilots got only 15 hits. That's a rather disappointing 19% hit rate. It was a poor performance of the second wave. It contributed nothing substantial to the fleet in Pearl Harbor. Also, as in the case of the armor-piercing bombs, the general-purpose bombs were deficient. But the second wave had the opportunity to be more damaging. Take for example the Phoenix here, a modern cruiser which was completely ignored by the second wave, not to mention the first wave of torpedo bombers. She was a suitable target. But even more telling was the fact that the naval yard was basically ignored. 4 modern 10-ton cruisers were tied up here, all of them packed so closely together. One could hardly have missed anything of value had the attack been concentrated here. On top of this, these ships were in a very vulnerable position. Flammable materials were scattered throughout, hatches were open, fire main systems might have been isolated. A bomb hit here would have caused a tremendous fire and been particularly devastating.
So there was a potential to take down everything. There was a potential for it, but it was bad luck because of the weather, and also sometimes you can't be as accurate as you always are in the training. In war it's different, fog of war and all of that. But if the luck would have been a little bit different, still if the carriers weren't in port, they could have taken down all of those primary targets here, it still would have been, I know, it would have been a very huge loss to the US, but still, if they don't get the carriers, it's not a victory, it's still a failure. Because US can bring in its other task forces from, I don't know, other side of the world to defend the carriers and still attack Japan back. You need the carriers. I mean, the carriers were the same ones to pay back in the Battle of Midway, right? The same carriers that were not here at that point.
And there was no smoke around this area at all. The Japanese missed a chance to deliver a more effective blow. Only about 10 dive bombers attacked this area, and as previously mentioned, only a damaged near miss caused any damage whatsoever. By 9:30, the attack was over. The attack left behind 2,335 people dead and another 1,178 wounded. Civilian casualties totaled 103, including 68 dead. 5 battleships have been sunk, but only 2 were permanent losses, the Arizona and the Oklahoma. The rest were repaired and served before the war's end. The other 3 battleships at Pearl Harbor suffered light damage. However, this attack didn't really cripple the Pacific Fleet. Soon the Japanese would realize that it wasn't these old, obsolete battleships that posed the real danger to them. It was the carriers that they had missed. They would soon feel their vengeance half a year later.
Midway.
To the list we can add a target ship and a mine layer, and the repair ship Vestal, which was beached. There was heavy to moderate damage to 3 destroyers, 2 light cruisers, and a sea tender. And there was light damage to a light cruiser. The Japanese also achieved great success on their strikes on the airfield spread out on Oahu. Over 160 planes were destroyed. They destroyed 2 to 3 times the number of aircraft that they had expected. The Japanese lost only 29 planes, 9 in the first wave, 20 in the second wave. A testament to the Americans' quick air defense. Also, none of Japan's 5 midget submarines made it back.
Midget submarines. I'm very interested about those. Like, they're truly, I know the Nazis had the same thing, like 1 crew member only. a very tiny submarine, very agile, very maneuverable. They have one torpedo. They could take a very good hit, could have taken down an entire very expensive ship, but you know, things went differently.
Was the mission accomplished? Well, yes. All 4 battleships hit by torpedoes were out of the war for 6 months or more, and they had sunk 1 other battleship by bombs alone. And with that, the Kido Butai sailed back home, unscathed. World War II had just started for America, and the sneak attack left behind a temporary shocked nation, but a nation that afterwards would be resolved to finish the war with nothing less than a total victory on their side. The Japanese had awoken a sleeping giant.
Whoa, damn. So it was a fact of intelligence. If the Japanese had better intelligence, knowing that the carriers wouldn't have been in the port, the Japanese would have not attacked, I think. That was the primary target. If they knew where they were, I think they would have attacked those. But because even if the whole Pearl Harbor fleet was battle ready, but they wouldn't have the carriers anymore, they couldn't attack against Japanese carriers. So yes, you need to take down the carriers. Anything else doesn't really matter next to them, as Midway told us. This was very interesting. I like this. I'm gonna watch more naval battles about the US and Japan because I love this topic. I do, and I hope you also. As I mentioned, if you want to talk about these topics, if you want to just show me your weapons collection, whatever you want to do, we can screen share in Discord, we can voice chat there. You just have to become a member of this channel and you will automatically get a role in Discord, soldier, sergeant or general. I'm gonna be voice chatting with generals in a week, so be there. And as always, my friends, until my next video, go and get the cup, because 4th of July will be the date the competition ends. You have time until then. Stay cool, and bye bye.